cometh upon us, as the sword, judgment, or pestilence, or famine, we stand before this house, and in thy presence, for thy name is in this house, and cry unto thee in our affliction, then thou wilt hear and help. And now, behold, and I want you to notice this very touching part of their prayer as they called on God. And now, behold, the children of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, whom thou wouldest not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt, for they turned from them and destroyed them not. Behold, I say, how they reward us, to come to cast us out of thy possession, which thou hast given us to inherit. O our God, wilt thou not judge them? For we have no might against this great company that cometh against us. Neither know we what to do, but our eyes are upon thee. That's wonderful. When God's people come together to pray like they did here. The enemy had come out against them with a multitude against which they had no might. And they prayed to God. They prayed to God. And you read the story when they prayed, a prophetic word came forth. And God said to them in that prophetic word, be not afraid. This is in verse 16, the middle part of verse 16. Well, verse 15. Yeah. Be not afraid, nor dismayed by reason of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Wonderful. And then God told them in the 16th verse, he says, tomorrow go ye down against them. He says, go against them. Go against this great multitude. God said the battle is not yours, but God's. In other words, I'm going to fight for you. And this is one reason we never have to be afraid. Because he says, I am with you always, even unto the end of the age. How do we know what to pray about in situations that are beyond our personal needs? You know, when you are in need of something, you know what you want. All right? Maybe you need whatever it is that you need. You know what you want. And so you pray and you ask God because you already know what you want. But when it comes to things that are outside you, like we talk about things that have to do with national issues, global issues, and so on, how do you know? How do you know what to ask for? It is by knowing the scriptures, by knowing the word of God. When you know the word of God, you pray in line with God's will. You see, you don't just say thy will be done. You got to know what that will is. When Jesus prayed, thy will be done, Jesus knew what will the Father had. And he mentioned it. So, when you pray, and you pray for God's will, you better know what that will is. You better know what that will is. And you have to understand that just because something is God's will at a particular point in time doesn't mean that that is his desire. You'll be surprised. There's a difference between a will and a desire. I'll give you an example in the Bible. If you would read in Isaiah chapter 38, it gives us a story about King Hezekiah. And the Bible tells us that Hezekiah was sick. And And when he was sick, the prophet Isaiah was sent to him by God. And God said, go tell him he's going to die. He should set his house in order because he's going to die. So God right there stated his clear will for King Hezekiah's life at that moment. So he says to Isaiah the prophet, go tell him he's going to die. He should set his house in order because he will die and not live. So Isaiah, being a prophet of God and knowing this is the will of God at this moment, walks to King Hezekiah and tells him, thus saith the Lord, set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. And left. But then the Bible tells us Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to God. Well, you can see it in that second verse. Then Hezekiah turned his face toward the wall and prayed unto the Lord, and said, remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee, how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. He wept. Then came the word of the Lord. You know, he prayed. Some of the part of his prayer you would find in a few verses down. But let's read what happened. Next verse, look at it. Then came the word of the Lord to Isaiah, saying, go and say to Hezekiah, thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will add unto thy days 15 years. Here's a man's going to die. God says, set your house in order, you're going to die, you're not going to live. God gave him time to prepare. He says, get ready, you're going to die. And then the man prays, and God tells the same prophet, says, go back and tell him, I've heard your prayer, I've seen your tears, I've added to your days 15 years. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. All right, let's read further. And I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city. And this shall be a sign unto thee. And he gives him a sign. He gives him a sign. And all that was just so beautiful. But I want you to go to verse 17. He says, behold, for peace I had great bitterness, but thou hast in love to my soul delivered it from the pit of corruption. For thou hast cast all my sins behind thy back. For the grave cannot praise thee. I want you to see the mentality of the man, King Hezekiah, why he prayed the way he did. All right? So you can see how God's desire versus God's will at that moment. He says, for the grave cannot praise thee, death cannot celebrate thee, they that go down into the pit cannot hope for thy truth. The living, he shall praise thee as I do this day. The father to the children shall make known thy truth. The Lord was ready